Hello everybody and welcome to Blender 2 Train Sim Tutorial Part 3. Today we are going to be having a look at how to create textures for your model. In the last video, you'll probably remember, we created this model. And it's looking pretty good, but now we need to put some textures on it because currently this isn't going to do anything for us. So, the first thing we need to do is actually create the textures. For this, I use GIMP, sorry. You can use any photo editing software, MS Paint, Paint, Paint Shop Pro, anything I believe you can use, as long as you can save as a .png file. Yes, it is as simple as saving as a .png file. First off, obviously download it. I will put a link to the GIMP website which you can download the latest version from. I do not believe the version of this actually makes a physical bit of difference because they can all export PNG files. So, first off, once you've loaded GIMP, I'm on 2.8 by the way if you were wondering, if yours looks different. So first off, you want to create your texture. Now, really what you'll want to be looking at is as small texture as you possibly can. Now, I'm going to be creating a 1024 by 1024 texture. There's some basic rules of texturing which I've got to go through first of all. First of all, they must be square root or numbers that are square root sort of thing. Or squared numbers, sorry. Yes, that's the word. First of all, they must be squared numbers. You can't have a random number like 142 pixels or whatever. You know, it can't be a completely random number of pixels that your texture is sized by. You can have 144 pixels because that's if you square root that, you get 12. 64, you'll get 8, for example. But you couldn't have 145 because you can't do a square root of it into any exact number. It's just the way the photo converting software is actually set up, because you've got to convert these photos later and they can only work if the objects are of squared numbers. Having said that, you can have any squared number by any squared number combination. The minimum limit is 64. Any squared numbers beneath 64 are not applicable. Any squared numbers above 4096 are not applicable. Anywhere within that range you can have any combination. So you could have 64 by 4096 and it would export the texture absolutely fine. Personally, I recommend you create generally 1024 by 1024 textures. For this one, I may end up creating a 512 by 1024. Because I'm thinking having a sort of horizontal texture might be quite useful for me. Generally, you're going to want a texture that's square. Also, generally, you're not going to want to make a texture that's over probably about 1024 by 1024. Sometimes I'll stretch to a 2048 by 2048 if I really need to. Only on a very, very rare occasion will I go all the way up to 4096 if I'm doing either an enormous face that needs a single texture or something that is extremely detailed, in which I will cram as much information and as many bits of a texture into that section in a second. But I'll show you sort of, at some point, I'll show you how you can design your textures to work. So, first off, we're going to start with these black bits. We know they're black because obviously if we look back at our pictures, they're all black. Now, obviously this isn't a great image to use. We can't really get a colour palette from this particular image. Why? Because the photo was taken at night. You can see there are orange sort of glowing lights around the object. And therefore, we can't really get a good feel of the colour. We want a proper daylight colour. This is what you've always got to remember when you're making an asset. You want to get your colour as daylight as possible, so you get the real colour of it. However, I did take a photo of this particular asset during the day, so therefore we actually have a colour which we can use. And the way I shall get this colour from this image into GIMP is by going to Snipping Tool, clipping a new snip, and I shall basically just select a portion of the image. Copy the image, and we'll go back to GIMP. Right. I'm going to use a standard flat colour. For something like this, it doesn't really make too much difference. You could sort of try and texture it and make it look weathered if you so desired. For the particular demonstration, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you how to create your basic images. So I'm going to create a 64 by 64 texture. That's all I need. That's all I need. Paste that snipping I took. Then you have a colour palette. Now, what's the realistic colour which I should be using? That's always the big question, because obviously there's two different colours here, but in reality they're painted the same colour. Well, in this particular demonstration, I shall be using probably this colour from the lighter side. Why the lighter side? Because when you bake your textures, and I'll show you how to do that in probably the next video, I imagine. I'll probably show you how to design textures in this one. When you bake your textures, you will find that you need to... Your colours will change. Your colours will darken with the baking process. That's just the way it is. You can do stuff about it, which I'll sort of explain when the time comes. But you need to sort of consider the fact that your textures will change colour. I'm going to also just slap that down to a proper grey colour, rather than having a slight hue of different colour values inside. Simply all I'm going to do here, fill that, job done. That is my texture for my first object. Exporting this, I'll go File, Export As, go to my actual object, click on my Textures folder, copy the directory from this, and paste it into here. blackorig.png, I shall call it. It doesn't, at this point, before you've baked it, it doesn't really matter what the actual image is called. I'll also copy this again, even though I shouldn't need to, but I'll copy it again. And we'll jump across into Blender, where we can go from solid mode, as you see here, to texture mode. Press U, Smart UV, and OK. You'll need to be in edit mode in order to be able to access this. Now, what do we do from here? Where's that gone? If I go up to these little lines in the corner, I can pull out a new window. We now have a duplicate of our window here. I shall get rid of that. What I can do from this point is go down to this box here, click UV Image Editor, and here's our image. Here's the image that we've just changed. You'll see they're all square. Why are they square when clearly in the model they're sort of elongated and all kinds of shapes? Well, I've not fixed the scale on this model. What I can do, I can go Control A. Well, I can actually do Control Shift Alt C. Control Shift Alt C. That'll bring you this box up. I'm going to center the origin to the center of mass, meaning the origin of this object is as central as it can be. Hit Control A and apply a rotation and scale lock. Now, if I perform the same function again by unwrapping that, you'll notice we have elongated textures, and it's unwrapped it a lot better as to how it should be than what we had before. If I open that, I can now go back to this because I've lost my copy. Copy this directory, paste the directory into there, and load my texture. Job done. One object textured. These are simple objects, so I'm not going to dilly-dally around texturing. Do the same thing here. Unwrap again. Open. This time, your file will be in the top recent, in the most recent, in the top. So we can just do that, and then we've got the same texture. Alternatively, what you can do, let me just double check that everything is all centered. Is that the right one? Oh, no, we need to select all faces. If you find that only one face is selected, you can press A twice, and it will select everything. Again, if you select If you press A, it will select everything. Press A again, it will deselect. Just do this as many times as it takes to select something. Unwrap that. Rather than going open, we could also bring up this drop-down menu. And click on our texture. And there you go, it's mapped. So that's a simple texture we've created for our background. For this next bit, we're obviously going to want to create a slightly more advanced texture out of the object, out of the face. And I'll show you how to, I'd go about doing that. So, go back to Blender, close your existing file, GIMP, and then you'll be met with this. Completely new page again. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to set my width to 1024, my height to 512. Again, as long as all values are squared numbers, it doesn't actually matter what size your textures are that you make. From here, I'm going to go back to this image that I took here. This image is as straight on to the front as I could possibly get it. What I'll do, grab my snipping tool again, select this as best I can, paste that into there, job done. From here, I've worked out a way which you can actually sort of recreate this, because obviously this texture here can't really be used. You know, the lights all cut all off colour, and it's at an angle, and it just wouldn't look quite right if I put it directly onto the model like this. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to manually recreate this texture, and I'll show you how I do that. First off, I quickly googled street sign names. I'm not going to show you anything because obviously these images are subject to copyright, but I've taken an image of a sign that exists in real life with better lighting on it. I'm going to slightly correct this colour, I reckon. So now we have our base colour. Let me get rid of our background, and I shall also get rid of this section. Add a new layer, transparent layer. And then colour the entirety of the top of this in that white that I've just selected. Now, when you're creating textures, you can use Google and other sort of search engines in order to be able to get a texture which you can use. The problem with doing this is that all images are subject to some sort of copyright. The same goes for brand names. You're not allowed, legally, including if you're going to be making freeware assets, you still need permission from the owner of them photos, or them logos, or them names. You're going to need permission in order to be able to use them things on your models. So technically, you can't release an object with London Overground, or Northern Rail, or ScotRail, or something on it. Okay, so now I've got that, I'm going to start measuring up my my sign, the picture that I took. So, if we pull across and select from one side of the sign to the other, we can see that the total length of the sign, I'll measure it from about there to there, it's approximate, it's just an approximation, is 807 pixels wide. I also want Notepad to make notes of these. 807 pixels wide. We know that our existing texture that we created is 1024. So if we divide that by each other, 1024, the total size of our texture, by 807, the total size of the sign, we'll get 1.268. And I would copy the entire thing. This is our multiplier. And this should sort of stay constant throughout. We now want to find out how wide our blue section is. And I shall get a colour for the blue section in a second. But first off, I'm going to measure up the blue section. The blue section, we know, is 126 pixels long. Assuming it sort of runs to the same area. Ignoring this... Well, I guess we'll put the white border in. We know that the blue section is 125 pixels long. So what we can do... We can type 125 times by our multiplier to give us 158 wide. Paste that into there. That's how wide our blue section needs to be. 158.6. I'm going to round that up to 159. That's how many pixels wide our blue section is. Okay, so I grabbed us a nice blue colour, as you can see on the left-hand side. We know it's 169 wide, so if I make it 169 wide like so, I can fill that area, and that's the size of our T sign. What I'm going to do now, I shall do the exact same thing for our height of our sign. So I shall take the height from there to down the bottom here. That's 125. So ironically enough, we've actually got the same maths as we had for the sign, for the T sign. So that means we can look at our back. We had 159 tall, so we can make our sign 159 tall. 159 puts us to there, so we're actually too tall at the moment. So what I shall do, I shall come along, plop, delete that, and I'm pretty sure I made that too wide. So I'll just go back and correct my mistake here. 169 now. I made it 10 wide, 10 too wide. So I shall do that. Select the colour again, because it's a slightly different colour to what I had. Fill that section, and there we go. Okay, so I did a bit of recalculation, and because it didn't look right, and I've measured it elsewhere to 165 tall. So it's not a perfect system, but it gives you an idea of how, it's accurate enough. It's accurate enough, let's say. So I'll just fix my height quickly. And the only reason why I could tell it didn't look right is because on that sign below, you can see we have we can see the blue is a slight rectangle. Whereas on our sign, the blue is a square. So, you know, you can sort of tell by eye that it wasn't quite right. Okay, but now I've fixed that, we can move on to the next step, which I might as well make this T, the little T logo. Next, so I'll select the colour. We know the T is probably going to be centered, so we'll assume it's centered. I'm going to take the width of this, which is 49. Grab our multiplier again. 49 times that gives us 62. I shall round it down to 62, and we know we have 62 pixels either side. The width of this itself is about 23. 23 times our multiplier is 29. So we're looking at about 62, 29, and 62. Now, it might not work exact. We'll sort of work that one out later. 62. 29. And does the other side measure 62? Let's have a double check of that. If it doesn't, it's fine. We'll assume the 29 to be the correct value. And we'll move the T around. 68. There you go. So it's about right. It's off by 1, but that's fine. Nobody's going to notice 1 pixel. I would just like to point out here that 68 minus 62 does in fact equal 6 and not 1. It takes me a while to work this one out, and you'll see me correct it later. We also need to measure the height of it, so it is from the bottom 14 pixels. 14 times our multiplier is 18, rounded. Meaning we'll take 18 at the bottom, please. And then we'll fill the rest of this in. Before measuring the top. Measure the smaller ones is my advice. The smaller distances. 16 times that to give us 20. That should be reasonably easy to measure. All I can do, or what I can do this time, is go up. 114, so that's 190, no, 94. 94 we want then. 94. That gives us a gap of 20 at the top. Done. Just measure the sides and then add the red bit in the middle. We'll assume, call it 25, I think, for this one. 25 times that. 32. Take that from the top. We need to find out the height of that. $32. Do that. Just add the bits. Just work out the bits that you know, and then find out the bits that you don't later. That's the advice I can give you on that one. 32. In fact, we know it was one less, so we'll go 33 just to sort of balance it out. In fact, you know what? What I'll do, in fact, I'll go 32 this side, and I shall add one onto the edge of this side, just to make it a bit more even, like so. 26 times our multiplier gives us 33. So that makes that 33 tall. That's the blue I've got. Select the correct colour. Work out the difference between these. 4, 5. We'll assume that's a square, I reckon. Due to perspective, we'll say that that's a square. So it's 4 and 5. Sorry, we'll go 4. We'll go 4. Gives us 5. So it's minus 6. 6 by 6. So we know that anywhere in there should be red. Six by 6. Again, anywhere in there should be red. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's the red bit. Zoom out on our final model. It could be a bit thicker, I reckon. I might adjust this a bit more. But you get the basic principle of how I create stuff. It's not quite worked out. It's not worked out quite right, but in this particular instance. But you get the basic principle of how I create my textures when I've got specific designs to do. I'm going to go away and fine-tune this and do all the text and stuff. The text I'll draw out in the exact same method as using this, except I'd use a text box instead of drawing it manually. So yeah, I shall be back in a bit. Okay, so I decided halfway that I'd probably do that as a time lapse. So hopefully that explains the process of how the calculation system that I've devised actually works better during that. Because I know I did a terrible job of explaining it before, and that was, or showing it off before, and that was because I was trying to talk. But as you can see, if you compare the two, they're actually looking pretty close now. It's not bad. I can live with that. So yeah, it works. It does work if you just give it enough time and patience. Anyway, I think it ought to be time to go and map that to our texture. Hang on, I've done something. There we go. Get rid of that. So, if I export as, go back, sign.png. Oh, hang on. I want to call it sign orig. Now, the orig part has absolutely no meaning to the asset itself. It's literally just because in the past, when I started baking, I realised that I needed to distinguish between the assets I didn't need to use and the assets I did need to use. Because obviously you've got to have a baked asset in order to use a non-baked asset sort of thing. So what I want to do is, that, pretty much. Stretch to meet UV bonds. No, I want to go the other way. Can I... If I unwrap then... Okay, fine. That's not going to stretch the actual mapping, is it? That's going to make it look weird. Okay. All I've got to do now, basically, is just, center this to 56, I believe. And then multiply that by 2. Not quite. It's close, but it's not quite. Basically, I've just got to map this to the model now, correctly, so... Take a bit of shunting around probably, but eventually we'll get to the point where we've mapped it correctly. We've got a bit of a wonky line there. I can probably also, what I could do is unwrap from projected view, and if I go into this, I can actually do that like that. Basically, what I did there was I pressed 5 on the numpad. 1 puts you to the side, 3 puts you to the front, 7 upstairs, and 9 underneath. You can also move around with 4, 6, 8, and 2, and basically you can do all that in you can do all that without pressing 5, but 5 puts you in exact angles, so you can more easily unwrap certain items. Certain textures. So if I now pull that down, I don't think that model is actually going to map too badly to this object, to be honest. Normally, what I'd do is I would do these all, sort of move this about and pull that out and do it to the exact. However, of the pixels. However, because it's because I've got the curved edges, I don't really want to do that because what I'd end up doing is sort of changing the perspective of the model and shifting about bits that shouldn't be in certain places. So I'm just going to play about with this for a little while, until it matches as good as physically possible. And to be honest, that's probably it anyway. I might make it just a tiny bit shorter, just so that hopefully it definitely fits. That'll do. That'll do nicely. Pull it down a bit. Yeah, that'll do. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Right, okay, it actually looks pretty good on the texture. Again, like I say, if this looked horrible, if it sort of looked a bit like it was stretched or elongated or something, you know, if it looked a bit stretched, then you can change the size of this object, obviously. But no, that looks okay. That looks fine to me. So what I'll now do, I should have done this before really, but I should have done the rotation scale, select the entire asset, deselect, go into the face and deselect the front face that I've just mapped, unwrap, and all I'm going to do for this particular asset, I'm going to pick a random white point. As long as it's white, it doesn't really matter. It can be any size, any shape. And there we go. That's our texturing done. I think now I'll separate the texture baking into a new video. I was going to do it as one with this video, but I think I'll do it as a new video. And we'll do texture baking and preparing to export, I reckon. Because they're hand in hand. They go together nicely, them two. So in the next video, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do we're going to do texture baking and export preparation. And in the final video, I'll show you how to export. So, thank you very much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye!